Nothing on the Bonnell Foundation's Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast should be considered medical advice. Medical advice can only come from your CF physician. Cystic fibrosis can be a devastating diagnosis, but living with the disease can bring positivity and a new appreciation for each day. From the Bonnell Foundation in Detroit, Michigan, it's the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast, sponsored by Vertex Pharmaceutical. Here's your host, Laura Bonnell.
Kate Bryan is an amazing person, and I'm glad that you'll get to meet her through this podcast. Her first documentary has been nominated for an Emmy. She also does some documentaries. FYI, you have to check that out. So proud of her. About 3 years ago, she started her podcast, and she interviewed me, and I am happy to play it for you here on the Bonnell Foundation's Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast. So much has changed for the both of us since we first met and did this interview. We have grown and have increased our visibility so much. So here is the interview that Kate did with me when she started One Girl Revolution.
Welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast, a podcast that shares the stories of everyday women who are changing the world through their lives. I hope that these women inspire you as much as they've inspired me, and I hope that they help you to see the power that you have to change the world through your own life. I'm your host, Kate Bryan, and before we get into this week's episode, please make sure that you're following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. That's the number One Girl REVO. And please invite your family and friends to follow along as well. You can find more stories, more podcast episodes, all of our social media links, and so much more on our website at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number One Girlrevolution.com. On this week's episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast, I am so excited to welcome Laura Bonnell. Laura was a reporter for many years and was there when the doctor who discovered the cystic fibrosis gene announced it to the world. Interestingly enough, after she got married and had 2 daughters of her own, both of her daughters were actually diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, the very genetic disorder that she witnessed a press conference announcement for years before. Laura joins the One Girl Revolution podcast to share her own life story, more about what cystic fibrosis is and what it means, and her own family's journey with the disorder. She talks about her daughters, Molly and Emily, how their journeys with CF were different and similar, how they're doing now and what they're doing now. These 2 girls are incredible, and I can't wait to see what the future holds for both of them. Laura talks about her own journey as the mother of 2 children with CF, what she's doing now to help other mothers and families, and how her family's foundation came to be and how they're helping other individuals and families with cystic fibrosis. She talks about that and so much more. I am so excited to have her on this podcast and to share this episode with you. Laura used to tell her girls, everyone has something, we have CF. Victimhood was not allowed in their family, so what Laura has to share is so refreshing. The reality is we all have something to deal with in our lives, so maybe you don't have CF or have a direct connection to it, but I know that you will take so much from this episode. Laura is such a light, and I learned so much from my time with her. I know that you're going to love Laura as much as I do, so without further ado, I hope that you enjoy this episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast. Here's Laura. Laura, welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I've listened to a couple of your podcasts and they're fabulous. So I'm very honored and excited to be part of it.
I'm so excited to talk to you about your journey, your life, your story. Also to talk about your daughters, your journey with CF, your family's journey with CF. There's so many things that I want to get into, but I'd love to just kind of get to know a little bit about you and your background. So maybe could you just tell a little bit about your life before the Bonnell Foundation?
Sure. And I'll make it a short story, but it did start when I was 12 because that's when I knew I wanted to be a news reporter.
Yeah.
And I thought I can do that. And it was really exciting to me. And so I ended up at WWJ Radio in Detroit, a CBS radio station, all news station, and started there. And I always thought, I mean, it was fantastic. I loved it, but I always thought something was missing.
And I was I took a year off from radio, and I went and worked at the United Way in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And when I was there, I met someone for the first time with cystic fibrosis. At that time, I wasn't married. I didn't know anything about cystic fibrosis, and I was helping them with a spread that told about the United Way agencies, and one of them was the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. And I was at U of M, and that's where Dr. Francis Collins discovered the gene that causes CF. And I was there at that time. And I went back for the news conference. U of M was handling it, but the foundation, the United Way Foundation, wanted to make sure that, everything was talked about correctly. And I had met Jeff in the lab when we were doing this newspaper spread, and he had cystic fibrosis. And so I was like, wow, they found the gene. That's awesome.
Wow.
Little did I know what was going to happen 5 years later. So there we were. And it was a huge event. And then I got back into radio reporting and everything. Then I was married. Then we had Molly, and we found out she had cystic fibrosis. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's my life purpose.
Yeah.
Like, it hit me. And, it was a hard day. My husband came from 8 kids, and I had 2 brothers. And we just, I was out on a breaking news story, and we had said to the pediatrician, she has cystic fibrosis. Like, I've been reading. She has all the symptoms of cystic fibrosis. And the pediatrician, who I love to this day, at the time said, no, you're a first-time mom. Go back to work. Everything's fine.
Wow.
And I kept seeing all the symptoms, and our dog was licking her because she was very salty. And then we remembered the Fox 2 commercial that Sherry Margolis did at the time about Kiss Your Baby, because they taste salty, and then they have cystic fibrosis.
Interesting.
But Joe and I were like, well, was that diabetes? Or no, that was cystic fibrosis. So I did more research, and I'm like, she's got cystic fibrosis. I know it. I called the pediatrician back. I said, she has to be tested tomorrow. Like, not a month from now, tomorrow. So we had her tested. I was on my way to a breaking news story. She called me and she said, pull over. And I said, I know what you're going to say. I know what you're going to say. She's like, just pull over. So I pulled off the road, and she said, yeah, she's got cystic fibrosis. I'm so sorry. And I was like, that's fine. At least we know.
Right.
I know now.
Yeah.
So I left work. I went back to the station. I don't even remember what breaking news story I was going to that day, all those years ago. But, and we had a beer on the porch, and we said, all right, well, we just got to educate ourselves.
Yeah.
So we know what to do.
Right.
Because can't ignore it.
Right. How old was she?
When we diagnosed
Yeah.
her, she was 3 months.
Wow.
Which was very young. I know people who haven't diagnosed their kids until 18. So
It's crazy that you were just paying attention, because I feel like most of the time, especially a new mom with their first baby, it's kind of like, oh, like this must just be normal. It's great that you ask questions, and it's probably your reporter background that got you to that point where you were like,
definitely.
I wonder if something's not right.
And I think it was all meant to be.
Yeah.
From the reporting, from the CF diagnosis. I mean, I wouldn't wish cystic fibrosis on anyone. I mean, I don't think anyone wants a chronic illness, but it was my purpose in life. It was what I was meant to do here in life. So,
and it's amazing that you were there when they announced it too. Like,
Right.
that's so crazy to
Dr.
see your
Francis
life like play in front of you and be
we
like,
talk about it still.
Yeah.
I've talked about it with him, and I've seen him all these years later. It's truly incredible.
Yeah, and all the other things, you were so busy with so many other reporting gigs.
Well, I took a year off, so I was working there.
Right.
But yes, but you're right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then you had a second daughter.
We did. We thought long and hard about it and didn't know of any way to, have another child that wouldn't have CF. And looking back naively, I thought, well, it couldn't happen twice. Although I was completely wrong, because there's a 1 in 4 chance with each pregnancy. And since then, I've definitely learned that it's very common that if you have a child with cystic fibrosis, that you will have more, with cystic fibrosis. Even though it's a 1 in 4 chance, there are so many other families I know that have multiple kids with cystic fibrosis. But we did stop after the second child, after Emily was born. And Emily knows the whole story. And of course, there's no regrets. And it's actually worked out better because they know what each other's going through.
So for people that are listening that might not know what CF is, can you talk a little bit about what is CF?
Sure.
And what have you learned? Because I feel like you've probably learned so much through your own journey.
Information. Cystic fibrosis is a genetic disease that causes chronic and fatal lung infections, and it interferes with digestion. It affects every organ of your body, and there's also a high risk of colon cancer in people with cystic fibrosis and diabetes. So everything's affected. One of my daughters has digestive issues more intensely than the other. The other has, a lot of sinus polyps, so it varies. And then Emily has more lung infections. Like she's had 15 cases of pneumonia and PICC lines and hospitalizations and all that. So it differs with each child, and there are so many different mutations of the disease. Like we're up to 2,000 now, I think. So
yeah. And then how has their journey with CF changed from when they were little? I bet it's probably a little bit easier because they know now what to, like, if they're getting sick, they know kind of, okay, I'm getting sick, I need to do something. Whereas like when they're a little baby, it's so hard to know how to treat them.
Right. Well, and Molly, there's a 2.5 year difference between the girls. So when Emily was born, she was 8 months, and I was like, wow, she seems really kind of lethargic. So I dropped Molly off at preschool, and then I said, I better take her to the pediatrician. And they're like, yeah, we think she has pneumonia. Her oxygen level, it's low. It's in the 80s. You have to take her right to the emergency room. And she had pneumonia. So when they were little, they definitely did get used to telling me, even then when they were little, I think, how they were feeling. But now they know pretty much everything about when they're getting sick, and actually now they know what medicine works best for them, what they need to be on. So they learned a lot. We've all learned a lot.
Yeah. And now they're 22 and 25, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tell me about them now. Like, tell me what they're up to. I know they're doing a lot of incredible things, both of them.
Yes. Molly graduated from Parsons in New York, the fashion school, and now she's getting her undergrad at Central St. Martin, which is part of the University of London, and materials future in fashion out there. And to my surprise, because, I've always been connecting with other parents, and then started this foundation 10 years ago, and CF is my therapy, like my foundation and everything. So I was surprised when, for her senior undergrad project, Molly did this clothing line that was for people with chronic illnesses, that had a zipper on the sleeve of this knitwear, beautiful knitwear that she made that could fit an IV. And then she had a zipper in the chest area where you could have a port put in. And, she just did all these things where she thought, you need to feel good when you're in the hospital. Even though you're in the hospital, you could wear these comfy clothes, or, when you're out and about, you could do that. She also was part of the team that was picked by Karen Ware in her undergrad, and they designed a hospital gown. And it had 3 sides, so you couldn't see your backside,
Yeah.
And it had like a place for your iPhone or whatever phone you had, and the company chose what Molly and a couple of her classmates designed, and they're selling it now to hospitals.
Oh my gosh.
So that's amazing. And then, and getting her master's now, she's working on earth-friendly kind of clothing, and so things that are like sparkly are biodegradable, and things like that. So she's off and running, and that was a surprise to me, because I didn't really expect it. And she's just done some 3D lungs that I couldn't even tell you what project it was because we haven't had time to talk yet. So that's what she's doing. And then Emily graduated in advertising management, and she's fluent in Spanish. And she loves speaking to pharmaceutical companies about having CF. She's done some advocacy and wants to do some more advocacy as well. And she educates people and reaches out to people. So, and that's a volunteer in addition to her job. So it's been wonderful watching them grow and to see how they wanted CF to be a part of their life.
And just kind of meeting it head on, like instead of being a victim of something, you know, that you have, saying, I'm just going to meet it head on. And what a powerhouse your family has been to the CF community, just, you know, advocacy and talking to other families and really being an advocate for other people has been awesome.
Right. And then when they were little, you know, I was afraid to put them in preschool. Like, should I keep them in a bubble? Should I keep them home? What about the germs? And then I thought, no, that's not how we're going to live. We're going to live positive. I'm not doing this to them or myself. I can't let my fears rule their life. And that's been my motto to myself. Don't let my fears take away what they want to do. If they want to travel to Nicaragua on a mission trip, they're going to. And they did. They both did separately.
Wow.
You know, pack a bunch of drugs, medications from the doctor, get the okay, you know, etc. And when they were little, Emily especially, she's my drama queen and I love her. And she was like, it must have been first grade. And we were educating teachers and students every year, every grade. And this particular year, we were doing a fundraiser for the CF Foundation. And she went in every class. She takes 6 enzymes with every meal because she can't digest food. And she went into class and said, I have cystic fibrosis and I'm going to die. And she just thought that was the coolest thing to say. She got everyone's attention. And they're like, wow. And they were little, you know, and she showed them her enzymes and she answered their questions. I mean, what she knew at that young age, you know. And so we've always just addressed everything. Yeah. And we gave notes to every teacher. Feel free to ask us any questions whatsoever. There's no dumb question. Because sometimes people are afraid, you don't want to talk about it. Yeah. You know? Yeah. And then as they got older, it was definitely up to them to tell people. Like, you don't want someone to know you have CF. Or Emily started saying, I just have asthma, if she had to do an inhaler or something. Because it's such a long explanation. Right. You know, so.
And there's just, people don't really understand, you know, most people don't have, if they don't have a direct connection to CF or know somebody with it, they probably don't know a whole lot about it. So it's like, all right, am I going to like educate somebody on this whole thing? And this is what happens if this happens, you know, it's kind of meeting people where they're at. And it's like, some people, it's like not worth it to explain the whole thing. But I'm glad that you guys are advocating for it and just talking about it. Because I think that it feels like, to me, in the culture, we went from this place where people didn't talk about stuff, and now it's becoming a culture where people are more open to talk about stuff. Like, this is just the reality. Like, yeah, I have CF, or yeah, I have this, or like, in a way, we kind of, I think we all have something, you know, to deal with, whether it's like a sick kid or a sick family member or whatever, you know, like we all kind of have our thing that we have to deal with.
And that's funny you say that, because that is what I've told them since they were little. I've said, and they know it because they've quoted me, but I've said, everyone has something. We have CF. Yeah. So don't pity yourself. We're not going down that road. Being in a wheelchair for you may be worse than CF. You know, I mean, everybody, you know, but somebody who's in a wheelchair may think, oh gosh, CF would be worse to me. You know, like everybody does have something there. I've never talked to a person that hasn't had some challenge. Yeah. So you have to be mindful of that. Victim stuff, not allowed in this family. Yeah. So a couple years ago, Emily was waitressing and someone found out she had CF and told everyone at work, but Emily didn't know. And then everyone thought she was going to die. And this is, again, they're adults now, right? Yeah. They're in college and everything. And she called me and she was really upset. And I said, educate them. It was wrong what this girl did. It was horrible. Wasn't her story to tell. Not her place. But you're just going to have to educate them. They all know they're thinking horrible things, and you're going to have to educate them. So she did, and she felt better. And then the other girl who told everyone ended up feeling bad about it. But yeah. And in the workplace, it's been interesting for Emily as well, because you don't want to tell people in the workplace. There's all this weird, weird aspects of it. But she ended up telling them, and then it was so much easier. Yeah. They understood why she might have to go to the doctor or,
right.
Be
sick.
It's
hard because you also want your privacy too. Right. I get that, especially like when you're, we all want our privacy, but sometimes you just have to like meet people where they're at. And I think even you mentioned when the doctor called you and the doctor said, "I'm sorry." It seems like there's also this kind of, I don't know if it's just in the medical community or other places, but even
it's everywhere.
It's everywhere where it's, I interviewed a woman on this podcast a couple months ago, and her son has Down syndrome. And she was like, that was the first thing the doctor said to me is, "I'm sorry." And she was like, actually, my son is the brightest little light in our family. And now they're able to help other families that have, kids with Down syndrome. But it's like, there's kind of always this like, "I'm sorry." And it's like, well, it's actually just a real part of our life now.
Right. I can't imagine our life without CF. I mean, I obviously want healthy children. And if and when there's a cure, because there's not a cure yet, that would be fantastic, of course. But I think of all that we've learned from it and how much more we appreciate life every single day. I mean, certainly there's still like, we have ridiculous thoughts, like, you get mad at somebody who cuts you off, things like that, of course. But in the big picture, on a daily basis, it's like, got to let that go. Doesn't matter. It does not matter. But even to this day, people will say that they're sorry, friends or people that I just meet when they find out. And I think it's because they're thinking, oh, your kid's going to die. I think that's why they say they're sorry, maybe. I'm not sure. Yeah. But I guess it's a compassionate thing. But I do feel like I'm having the best life with my kids. They are kicking butt in this world. Yeah. They're doing great. I mean, I also think that even people are wonderful, but sometimes they really don't want to hear how you doing. They really don't want to know. And it may have at sometimes been to my detriment that I didn't share more. Everything's great. The girls are great, because I don't want to burden other people.
I think that's sometimes our like default too, is like when people ask you how you are, and it's like, yeah, everything's great. Right. And so it's I can see that too. It's like both. It's like, yeah, people don't really want to know, or we don't really want to talk.
Got like an IV pole. Right. She's taking it with school. She's flushing her own heparin into her IV med. She's on it for 3 weeks. Molly's got a PICC line in. She's going skiing. I've already called ahead to the first aid, and I told them, my daughter's there skiing. She's in high school. She's got a black jacket on. She's got a PICC line in her left arm. But yeah, don't tell her I called. But should she get stuck on a chairlift, and you need to take her down on a rope or something, she can only use one arm. And I mean, so I did do a few crazy things, but yeah. It's all fine.
Like that's part of motherhood, right? Right. It's like you have to do some of that crazy stuff for your kids. And then I want to ask you about the new drug, because you were telling me a story just about kind of there are so many medical discoveries happening. I know that with CF and other things too, they're constantly finding stuff, but it kind of is like a pull back and forth. Like it's kind of a rocky road, right?
Right. It is, so all these new drugs help the underlying cause of CF. So the easiest way to explain it is the way it was explained to me initially. And I thought it visually helps people. So depending on your CF mutation, my girls have 2 mutations, and most people with CF do, I believe. But with my girls, they have a door and a window that's closed, and it needs to be open, and those are basically the cells. So they need a drug that opens both the door and the window. Well, when Kalydeco and Orkambi and Symdeko came out, they didn't address opening the window and the door in the cells for my girls. So we were waiting, and Emily was like, I don't want to hear about these drugs until it's in my hand, And Molly is the healthier of the two, so she wasn't as concerned about the drugs. But we were all like waiting for this drug, and great, Kalydeco helps 4% of the population. I'm so happy for everyone. And this, and when Orkambi was going, before the FDA, because we were trying to get things approved more to help people, I was like, yes, come on. We need to all work together so that drugs are approved more. And then Trikafta came out, helping 90% of the CF population. I'm like, it's here. This is the drug that can help our girls. And it's not a cure, but it fixes the underlying cause of the disease. It's unbelievably amazing. So we, everyone can understand, I would say, fighting with the insurance company. You're working with the insurance company. Like it was approved by the FDA 5 months early. Vertex Pharmaceuticals spent $11 billion getting this drug to market. Like, the insurance companies are not going to halt it. So we need to get this drug formulary on, and we need the drug. So it was a lot of, we're going to send the drug. It's approved. Oh, wait, no, we need prior authorization. Okay, wait, got to call. Wait a second. Nope, we can't ship it from Indiana, which is 4 hours from Michigan. Nope, we can't send it there. Wait, we're out of Trikafta for one of your girls. No, we can get it for 2. No, we're going to have to ship it from Orlando, like your insurance company. I mean, it was crazy. So it was very emotional. Like, Emily's like, yep, just when it's in my hand,
Emotional roller coaster. Yeah.
Let me know. So we were tailgating up at Michigan State University where she was. And although she was graduated, we were just going up there to, party with the football group. And I let her go on ahead with her boyfriend, and I was sitting here waiting for the drug to be delivered by the UPS guy because they said it was coming.
Yeah.
So the guy delivered it, and I'm like, I get in my car, I'm driving up there, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to hand it to her there, I'm going to videotape it. So, because Molly's in London. So we did, and it was wonderful, and she was surprised, and she cried. She couldn't believe it. It was like the dream. Now it's here. And so it was a very emotional. Family and friends were there, and everybody was crying. And so it was wonderful. And then Emily started on the drug, and within 30 minutes, she felt, because it's this thick, sticky mucus in their body that, it clogs everything. It interferes with digestion because there's such a thick, sticky mucus, and that's why you take enzymes first. And then, she could feel like her sinuses draining, like, right away.
Wow.
Then she had a couple little side effects that we reported to the drug company because they want to know. But she was like, she used to cough for an hour in the morning, which is part of CF because you got to get that mucus up, and that's why you're doing a vest that shakes everything up, and why you're doing inhaled antibiotics every day and all of that. And I was like, every day I would hear her cough an hour in the morning, and then the coughing stopped. I was like, what? I think she coughed once on day 2, and then she wasn't coughing anymore. And I didn't even say anything to her because she didn't say it to me. I'm like, I don't even think she realizes she's not coughing. So day 3, I was like, or day 4, whatever it was, I'm like, you're not even coughing. She's like, I know, I'm not even coughing. And then her intestines, she has severe stomach pain all her CF life, and which is from birth, of course, but and it blocks everything in your intestines, and you get a blockage, and it's excruciatingly painful. And you have to go lightly or Miralax, and it can be every day or every week. It's just a horrible, and there's nothing, glamorous about that. And it's very, when you're sharing a bathroom at college, it's horrible.
Yeah.
So she started to say, oh my gosh, that's going away. I think I can eat food. Like, she lost so much weight at one point because she just stopped eating. She's like, I can't eat because I get stomach pain, so I'm just not going to eat. I'm going to try liquids or something. And she's like, and I can't remember the name of the hair that is in your intestines, but it is smushed by the, thick, sticky mucus. And now there's no thick, sticky mucus in your intestines. It's coming back to life. So you don't have stomach pain. So that was very exciting. And then day 8, she had a rash from head to toe, and she was itching like crazy, and it was so bad. I was like, oh my gosh. So she didn't take that morning dose. She called the doctor and they told her to stop taking it. And it kept getting worse still because the meds were still in her system. And then she's like, my throat's tightening up. I'm like, we got to go to the ER.
Yeah.
And we went to the ER. Of course, they had her clothes off her in 30 seconds and gave her epinephrine right away. And so it's been about a month, and she hasn't decided if she's going to go back on it.
Yeah.
And it's very hard emotionally for her and me, all of us, I would say. And, you know, she's talked to the drug company, and of course there's hope, and there could be a new drug in 2 years. They're working on this. But it's just a lot emotionally. So she told Molly, who's going to start it when she comes home, you got to get on it. We got to compare notes.
Yeah.
I hope it works for you and all of that. And Emily may go on it, but they will have to probably have her start it in the hospital in case, because I don't know if the reaction would be worse.
Right.
And she can't be on steroids for her whole life, I don't think, you know, so.
Yeah, it's got to be really emotional for your entire family in different ways, you know, because you obviously want to find a cure, and we hope for everyone with CF around the world that we find a cure, but it's just this constant.
And as a mom,
journey.
it's like you're thinking of I am anyways, maybe not everyone, but I thought of their life expectancy every day. Every day I thought, is this the day they're getting a cold and this is the lungs are going to be scarred? And the doctor kept telling Emily, you got to stay healthy. You got to stay healthy because your lungs still look pretty good. You know, just hang in there. The drug's coming out. The drug's coming out. There was so much pressure to stay healthy until this drug came out. It's around the corner. It's coming out. And then it failed. It didn't work for her. But we're still excited about it. It's still a miracle. It's still joyful. It's still working for other people. And what they learn from all of the side effects that some people are experiencing will help the next drug.
Right.
But emotionally, it's kind of hell, I would have to say. It's because she would then have a chronic illness and not a fatal illness. Without the drug, it's fatal. So we went back to it. I thought, I can finally catch my breath after 25 years of CF. Like, whew, chronic illness, I can handle that. But, this fatal stuff with no cure. Yeah. And I felt like, this is great. So something else will come up and maybe she can go back on it. And we've come so far. Right. I mean, in 30 years since the drug was discovered, people are living so long now compared to the average life expectancy right now is 47. When my daughters were born, it was 19, I believe. Wow. So, and a child born today, I was talking with some of the doctors when we were at a conference. And if you're born today with CF and you go on this drug, Trikafta, and it works for you, you're really a symptomless CF person. You won't really probably be hospitalized that much. Yeah. I mean, it's a fabulous time to be born with CF if you're going to be born.
Right. Well, CF. And even your daughters are still so young. So 22 and 25, and all of that has happened. Who knows what's going to even happen in the next 5 years? Right. How many discoveries are going to make. And I think it's kind of cool in a way that they both are going on this drug, that they can compare notes, like you said, because it's like maybe your family can be a huge help to the medical community to say, okay, this is what, one of us went through, and then this is what the other one went through, and really help other CF families around the world. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I got to ask you about your foundation. Mm-hmm. Tell me, how did the foundation start? I know that your journey with CF, started with your daughters and your family and education, but now you started a foundation.
Right. And well, when Molly was born, there wasn't that much information. They were like, don't go to the library. It was 25 years ago, so they weren't
there wasn't
saying
even
don't
Google.
Go, they weren't saying don't go to the computer. Right. They're like, don't go to the library. And the CF Foundation, does fabulous work for research, but they didn't have a lot of information or help for parents. They didn't have groups. So there just wasn't a lot of information for us. And then I thought, I need a foundation that will help parents. And I didn't have time, it's very busy. So I didn't have time until 10 years ago. I started the foundation to help families with medical assistance. Lung transplant grants, after all these years, are still considered experimental. So it's not covered by insurance for the most part. And so we help with lung transplant grant and medical assistance. Every state is different. Michigan has a really great program for people who need a secondary insurance. It's called Children's Special Health Care. And they cover, they're one of the few states that covers adults with CF. So whatever your private insurance doesn't cover, they'll cover it as a secondary insurance. But not every state has that. And not, and some people, for whatever reason, don't go on Children's Special Health Care. So we're just helping people with that financial assistance. And then we have college scholarships for people who have cystic fibrosis, and we help them with their undergrad education and give them up to $2,500 for each year that they are awarded a scholarship, and they can apply twice in their undergrad career. So, and then I've met people from around the world. And like I said earlier, it's therapy for me. It's fabulous to connect to all these families. Seamus from Ireland emailed me, and he's like, this drug Orkambi isn't approved here for my son. He's under 12. It's approved in the US. And I was like, well, I know Jillian in Ireland because I actually met her in Washington, D.C., and she's Irish, and she's connected, with your government there, and she's working at it harder than anyone else I know. So I connected those two.
Oh, that's cool.
Things like that was just fabulous. And then the Costco Connection magazine, I hounded this guy, this editor, for a year. I got to do a story about CF.
Whoa.
We have to do a story about CF. And I pitched him about the calendars. And I said, I want to give them away. People can donate if they want the calendars. I want to give them away in Costco. And I need to do a story about CF in your magazine. A year, I hounded him. Finally, he's like, all right, fine. I got a quarter page, to do my
it's
story.
In there.
It was a picture of the calendar. We were giving them out at the Costco in Madison Heights. Everybody got them. And so the little story appeared in Costco. I got a letter from somebody who saw that a week after it appeared, and she finally diagnosed her 18-year-old son with cystic fibrosis.
Whoa.
He had been misdiagnosed with red flags of CF. The doctor missed it for 18 years. She read that article and she's like, my son has cystic fibrosis.
Whoa.
And I still have that article. It was like, oh my gosh. So things like that, I was like, if I didn't have my foundation, if I wasn't doing that, we've just connected so much. And then I just got someone on Facebook from Canada said, you know what? Everybody thinks it's great. They can come here for the diabetic medication. It's cheaper. She said, but they won't approve Trikafta in Canada because they're following the UK, who won't approve Trikafta. They just did approve Orkambi. This is since Seamus first contacted me, but she's like, so no health system is perfect. I'm like, I know. I'm like, whatever you need, the Americans with CF will be over. We'll come to Canada.
Yeah.
We'll get our passports. Let us know. So that kind of thing has been wonderful.
Yeah. And just to use the foundation in that way to connect people and also to educate people. That's a crazy story about the calendar. How just somebody seeing an article or, seeing a calendar and being like, hey, I've always wondered what was wrong. And now I know, because you can't start treating something if you don't know know that it's CF. How can you treat it?
And to have a diagnosis, what a relief for her.
Yeah.
That family. You know.
What do you hope that the Bonnell Foundation can be in the world? Like, I know you've already done so much. Like, what do you hope that it's going to be 5 or 10 years down the line, that it's like the center for, anybody with CF, or that you can just really help families or educate people? What's your like big dream 5 or 10 years down the road for the foundation?
My dream is definitely to connect the whole CF community together. And I think we're working on it, but definitely to be talking to other parents so we can say things like, this worked for my child, or did you know about this? We really need to connect as a community, and myself and other foundations are trying to do that also. But I think that's the biggest thing, to connect, because like I want to travel around the world, the country, really, our country, and talk to other moms and dads, because it's an isolating disease, because our kids can't be together unless you have siblings that have the disease, because of the bacteria in their lungs can damage each other. So that's where the 5 feet apart movie came out. It's really 6 feet, and all of that. But yeah, that's what I would say, to keep bringing the community together. There are so many things I want to do that I haven't had a chance to yet. I was talking with another mom, a couple moms I know who have had to go on family leave from work because their child's having a lung transplant and they need to get time off work. And I think that's such a hard thing. You need the money, but your child needs you to be home. So I want to start a fund, like a union fund. Like I know unions have, if we, you're out of a job, whatever. And that's kind of where I got the idea. I want a fund where anybody who needs to stay home with their child after a lung transplant and before, we can say, we've got these funds here for anybody. And if you need to stay home for 3 months, here's whatever it is you need. So things like that can really have an impact.
And things like that are things that people don't often think about. Even I was talking to Molly McDonald, who started the Pink Fund, and she's amazing. Like, they're helping women who are going through breast cancer treatment. They're making sure that they're able to pay their bills. And when she said that, I was like, that's something that like most of us don't think about. It's like, oh yeah, this person has to go through treatment, but not thinking about, or somebody's kid has to get a lung transplant, not thinking about the other wear that it takes on the family, or like if they have to take time off of work. We don't talk about that. So I think it's really important to talk about it.
And not only do you need time off work for that, but the other thing is, my friend Dylan, he had his second double lung transplant, but he's from Kansas City. He had to get his lung transplant in New York. He had to move his whole family to New York.
Wow.
Who can afford to do that without a job? Right? I mean, so he had to get a place there and live there until after his lung transplant. And he finally just moved back to his hometown of Kansas City. But it's things like that. And then your spouse can't stay in the hospital unless they have a hotel in the hospital.
Right.
They need a place to live with the kids, so it's things like that.
I think there's something so special about your foundation, because you are a mom who's walked through this. It's not like a medical community. It's not connected to any company. Because I think oftentimes people are a little bit like put off by that.
Right.
So it's so beautiful that it's your family. Your daughters are thriving. And so what a great example that you can point to. And you can also point to the struggles, like the story you just shared about the trial drug. Like, our daughter, one daughter went through this, and we'll see what happens with the other one. But I think that with CF and other things, we need to build more community. I think just in the world in general, we all need more community. And so I think it's really beautiful that you're building this community that wasn't really there when your daughters were born. What would you say to other moms who have a kid with CF? What advice would you give them, or what would you just say to them?
I think the first thing is they have to go with their gut, and they have to do what they feel is right for their own child. I remember thinking, like I said, I should homeschool them and they shouldn't be around any germs, but that just wasn't my style. That's just wasn't how we were going to live our life. They should go out. And I remember when Molly first went to Nicaragua in her junior year, I was like, oh, she dies there. She was doing what she wanted to do. Not that it was okay or that it wouldn't have been horrific or anything like that, but I just thought, we have to live. So I guess that's what I would say to other moms is do what you want to do. Don't listen to someone else's, this is how kids with CF should grow up. Like if you decide homeschooling is for you, have at it. But I would just say follow your gut and absolutely follow your gut when you think something's going on with your child and CF. You are above the doctor. In my view, we are the ones that know. I mean, I can give you an example. Emily was just having fevers and they weren't going away. And I'm like, there is an infection in her lungs. I know it. And their doctor was like, and I love her. She's family. And she's like, no. I don't know. We'll put her on some more meds. And I'm like, I know I'm not a doctor, but I'm telling you, she needs a bronchoscopy. She has an infection. Nothing's working. You have to do a bronchoscopy. And like, you're working for me. Like I had to go there. Like you have to do this. So
I'm the boss here.
Right. She's like, I mean, I know my kid. I know what's happening. And she did the bronchoscopy. I'll never forget. I remember what she's wearing and everything. She came out and she said, I apologize. Her lungs are full of pus. She has a horrible infection. We got it all out. You were right, and I didn't need to be right. I just wanted you to hear me, you know, and then she was great after that. Hasn't had another bronchoscopy, didn't have to have another one, So it's things like that. Like you have to go with your gut. You have to talk to other moms. Don't be intimidated. This is just a person who went to med school. I mean, we can all go to med school. It's not our calling. Like I couldn't cut open anyone ever as a surgeon. It's definitely not my calling, but they just went to a different field. Like,
Right.
And someone who doesn't see you as important in that CF, doctoring of your child, you're with the wrong doctor anyway. But I guess that's my biggest thing. Listen to yourself, talk to your kids. And, it's interesting, I guess on how people talk to their kids. Like, I was always like, age appropriate, they're going to know everything. And we talked about death. We talked about how do you want to be buried? Do you want to be cremated? What kind of funeral do you want? I couldn't keep thinking about it in my head and wondering. So we, talked about it. And then we also talked about, well, someone else had asked me, well, what if one of your kids dies and one lives? And I thought, well, that's an awfully horrible question. Why would anyone ask me that? That is just horrible. It's like you see both your kids and you can only save one kind of question, right?
Yeah.
It's horrible. And I thought, well, I would remember the child who died and I would live with the child who's alive and celebrate their life.
You're telling some of the stories of things that they're dealing with on a daily basis and, some things that happen like whenever they get sick. And you can see how people would really struggle in those moments because it's like, is this even worth it? But we all have a purpose and we all matter. And, you also look at all the beautiful, incredible things that they're doing.
And you have so much to teach and learn. And
and that gives them purpose too.
Right.
Like the work that your family is doing really to educate other people, and even like telling the story about one of the girls telling people at their workplace, it's like we have to educate people about these things, and we have to get away from this culture where people just kind of hush like, oh yeah, that person has this, and it's like all the whispers. No, you just have to like meet it head on, and like this is what people deal with.
And it's funny too. Well, two things. First of all, when they were born and growing up, before I knew Molly had CFM, and when I was pregnant, I was like, oh, we're going to have like cucumber sandwiches and everything's going to be great and it's going to be wonderful. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, when they have CF, they only get half the calories because they can't digest food. And they're like, put a stick of butter in everything. And I was like, oh my gosh, there goes my dream of the healthy eating out the door. But, we've definitely adjusted it. Like Emily's vegetarian. They eat very healthy. We don't think necessarily the high fat diet for us is not good for them. So we've changed that.
Yeah. So I know your daughters aren't here, but I'm going to ask you to channel them for a second.
Sure.
What would they say to somebody who has CF? Or maybe they were just diagnosed with CF, or somebody who's struggling. What would your daughters say?
I would say Emily would definitely say it's awful and it's constant every day. There is definitely not a day that goes by, and probably not many hours that go by where she isn't thinking about CF because it's physically impacting her. But at the same time, I think she would say, this is what you got, you got to make something of your life. You just got to keep going. You have to, appreciate life more, travel, do what you want. I think it made her strong. She loves collecting quotes. And every time I see a beautiful quote, I send it to her because it inspires her. She has a book of quotes and things she writes down because she's got a lot to say. Yeah. So I think that's what she would say. She would acknowledge that it's hard. And some days it's like, some days you just don't want to go on. Yeah. And when they were little, I used to say to them, you don't have CF today. Today is a non-CF day. So if you don't want to take your enzymes, that's fine because you don't have CF. And I found it was great. We only did it once a year. Yeah. Really. But it was a great mental health day for them. It was really helpful. And Molly, what would Molly say? Molly would say that it's harder for her to say because she's been healthier than Emily. She's had her share of things CF-wise, but she would say she has a lot of healthy guilt because Emily's been the sicker one. So she feels like, oh gosh, Emily's always sick and I don't have the same health issues. Although when, she's still in the UK and she called me, and the way she said it, I thought, oh, she's been shot. She's like, everything's fine. Everything's okay. I don't want you to get on a plane. Do not panic. I'm like, what is wrong?
Oh my gosh.
You aren't getting on a plane. Do you hear me? Like on and on with this back and forth. Don't get on a plane. Everything's fine. And I'm like, just tell me what is going on. Yeah. Stop already. And she's like, I'm in the hospital. I've been admitted. I'm having an exacerbation. I'm getting a PICC line, blah, 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 blah. She goes, but the great thing is about the hospitals here in London, I'm in this beautiful hospital. It's very shishi. It's very fancy. And they bring me tea at 1:00 every day. I was like, all right. She said, I have my friends. Her friends came every day and brought her flowers and food that she could have and milk. She's like, there's no air conditioning in here. You wouldn't even like it. Don't fly out here. I'm like, oh my gosh. She's like, it's great. And they, in the hospitals here, like at U of M, they do the physical therapy in the room, or like it's the pats on the chest and everything to clear the lungs. Yeah. Or, but there in London, she's like, they take me outside. They don't care. They're like, walk for 15 minutes. Let's go for a walk. She's like, so, she says they have a bicycle in my room. So she's having a good time, and I could FaceTime with her, every day.
And it's not that far. So it's like, if you needed to get there, it's an 8 hours or whatever, if you really needed to be there.
And this is what I try to do. And this is, again, what I would tell another mom. She needed to have an episode, exacerbation by herself. Yeah. And it was great for both of us. Yeah. She knows she can do it. I know she can do it. And so from that perspective, it was good. And then just a funny insurance thing, I was like, when am I getting the big bill? When is the big bill coming? She goes, Mom, you pay in here. Because we bought insurance when she went over there. She's like, no bill's coming. You don't get a bill here. And I'm like, no, I know the bill's coming. She's like, Mom, you're not getting a bill.
Yeah.
And we never did get a bill. But that was funny. It's just, if every country could just get together and say, this is what works and what doesn't. I know it's so hard, but wow, if we could just fix the insurance, the health side of it, it would be amazing.
Yeah.
But Molly was, she was sent home on a Friday, and then Emily was admitted here on a Monday. So,
wow.
And they've been admitted together before.
Yeah.
So, but it was just like, okay, all right, well, Molly's good now. Okay, you're good now. And Emily's being admitted here. So,
It's good that they're on a little journey together. It
is.
Right?
Yeah.
So I want to ask you about the foundation. How can people find out more information about the foundation? And if they want to get involved, what can they do to support your work?
If they want to get involved in the foundation, they can either email us or go to the website, which is the bonnellfoundation.org. And then to email us, it's the Bonnell Foundation at gmail.com. And Bonnell is B as in boy, ONNELL. What if they want to help? And this is what I'm trying to tell people more. And again, it's advocating for ourselves. Sometimes I forget we need help too, the foundation, so that we can continue to help others. We've given out $500,000 in medical assistance right now.
Wow.
But then sometimes I'll see people we've given money to will say on Facebook, oh, I'm raising money, for research. And I'm like, that's great, but we need help from people raising money so we can continue to give money out to people who need it. So I'm starting to, it's hard to ask sometimes for for a foundation, but that's what we need. We need, if someone raises $500, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
That will help us to continue what we do. I mean, we have lots of fundraisers and we have very generous people who donate and all of that stuff. But that, and then anyone that's in Michigan and wants to volunteer, and sharing your story, another mom who wants to share her story, or one thing that happened with Trikafta initially, we were all sharing, what's your insurance nightmare? What's happening? What's your insurance great story? So that we can kind of say, here's what happened. With our insurance, people who had the same insurance, there was no learning curve in our insurance company. I would get through the process and talk to the same, and talk to, whoever it was. And then someone would say, I talked to, let's say it was like Amy and Rachel. It wasn't, but let's say it was. And I would say, well, that's exactly who I talked to, and we worked through it. So why don't they get it with you? Because we've already, why aren't they making the changes? Why don't they understand? So it's things like that to connect.
Yeah, and to share stories and educate the public, even to follow you on social media and, share different stories. If you see a story about, a family with CF or something, just to educate the public, because I think we all need to be educated on a variety of different things. Right. But those stories are so important. Or if you know somebody, like you said, like if you have a kid that has CF, or you have a family member or just somebody that share their story and talk about it.
Right. Yeah, we have a whole inspirational story segment on our website that people can write their own story, and then we put it on the website, and it just helps so much to connect the community and learn and keep going. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm going to end on the question that I always ask at the end of these podcasts. If you could leave women around the world with one message, what would it be?
And I think it is, and I may have sort of already said this, but I don't think we believe in ourselves enough. I can even say, I know I haven't. And the only thing that is holding us back is ourselves. So it's really important. And this is what I tell my girls, there is nothing, you can do whatever you want. Don't ask permission, just do it. Like, who's going to stop you? Just do it. So that's the best advice that took me a long time to learn. I wish I had known it when I was 20, because I think people who do realize it, who are super confident and like, why can't I do it? You know, I wish I would have known that at a younger age, but that's what I think. I think we can do a foundation. We can do whatever we want.
Yeah.
It's just having the confidence. And I don't think at the time I didn't think, oh, I could do my own foundation. And then I did. I'm like, I did that, you know.
Right. If you have an idea for something, go for it.
I would say go for it. And all the people I've met along the way, all the support, oh my gosh.
And that's it, is like if you have a dream and you start chasing it, so many people will come around you, because you probably have opened up a lot of opportunities through the foundation for other people to be outspoken or advocates or advocate for their kids. You know, they hear your story and they're like, I want to do that. So,
and the other thing is, myself and there's a group of us that have CF foundations from here to Florida to New York and California, and we are really good friends and we support each other 1,000,000%. So that's important too, to get support in your own community. I mean, there's no competition. There shouldn't be any competition that way. Everybody's doing different things and supporting CF families in different ways, and just really need to support each other.
Yeah. And you're stronger than you know, because I love that you said that in this podcast interview, because it's, you know, you're stronger than you know. And sometimes you have to go through something difficult or hard to really see how strong you are. And the same for your girls. I mean, they're amazing, and I hope the best for them. I can't wait to see where they go from here, because they have so many great things on the horizon. So
thanks,
Laura. Thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Thank you. It's been fantastic.
For more information on One Girl Revolution, check out onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Kate and I recently met and brainstormed lots of ideas in a local coffee shop in Metro Detroit. We'll share them soon. It is so wonderful to have great friends who inspire and support you.
The original music in this podcast is performed by Kevin Allen.
It's not complicated.
Who happens to have cystic fibrosis.
We all got our worries and fears. I know it's got you frustrating, but loving you is so alright.
This has been the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast. For more information and to learn more about the Bonnell Foundation, check them out online at thebonnellfoundation.org. That's BONNELL Foundation.org. This podcast was sponsored by Vertex Pharmaceutical, the science of possibility, and produced by Jag and Detroit Podcasts,